Thank you for the introduction, Olivia, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just to say at the start that we're delighted to sponsor this Ibec conference for the second year, and I'd like to congratulate Danny and his team on organising such a relevant and well-attended conference. The theme of the day, as you know, is the business of Europe, and it is timely, reflecting our current EU presidency and, most importantly, our increasing dependency on European institutions and economies. And this particular session, as Olivia just pointed out, focuses on the European business story. And to set the scene, I will outline a European perspective of our global CEO survey. Now, this is a survey that we conduct every year. It's in its 16th year. We surveyed over 1,300 CEOs across 68 countries, and we launched it last month in Davos. But what we're looking at this morning is a cut of the data reflecting the views of about 400 European CEOs. So it is a statistically valid sample. There is a short summary of the findings on your table, and my hope is that you will take away from this morning some ideas, some initiatives, or some actions that you can apply in your own organisations. So firstly, let's get a sense as to how CEOs are feeling about their own organisation's prospects for growth in the next 12 months. And what we have here is what we call the confidence curve. And it shows the proportion, and that curve there is the global results, the proportion of CEOs who are very confident about their own prospects for growth over the next 12 months. And you can see that globally, the CEO's confidence is lower than it was last year at 36%. And that reflects continuing uncertainty, fragility, and volatility in global economies. And when you look at the shape of the curve, particularly from 2007 onwards, you can see that we have experienced a prolonged period of disruption. Now, if I just overlay on that the results when we look at the European data, okay, and that, as you would expect, no surprises here, it mirrors the global level of confidence, but at a lower level. So the 400 European CEOs, of that group, 27% are saying to us that they are very confident about prospects over the next 12 months. What's interesting, though, is when we ask the CEOs to project forward for the next 3 years to 2016, so there is an expectation of an upturn. You can see there that globally there's an expectation that confidence will increase to 46%, and in a European perspective go to 34%. And I believe that this reflects the combination of a genuine anticipation of a global upturn together with significant levels of hope and aspiration. Now, in an Irish context, the data set is not valid, but we have our own Irish CEO survey, which we publish every year. And when we look at that, it would indicate that the Irish confidence curve would track the European curve, but at a slightly lower level again. Don't wish to overdwell on the confidence level, but I thought you'd just be interested in quickly looking at this slide, which shows the level of confidence across the regions. And as you can see, Europe is the most pessimistic region there with the figures that you would have seen on the earlier slide, 27% of European CEOs being confident. Not far behind North America, but at the other end of the continuum, you can see that the Latin American and Middle East CEOs are generally a much happier bunch, with 1 in 2 of them being confident about the future. So when we look at what's causing this level of worry among CEOs, as you would anticipate, nearly all of the respondents talked about the economic volatility. But beyond that, there were 4 particular factors that were worrying CEOs in Europe. The first and the most prevalent was the increasing tax burden. And this arises from European governments, and many of them being new governments such as in France, aggressively seeking to raise additional revenue. The concern, I believe, also reflects the present debate on tax residency and the increasingly intense media focus on which companies are paying what levels of tax and where, very much the Starbucks debate. And you would have heard earlier also from Danny the importance of the tax burden and ensuring that the tax burden here in Ireland doesn't increase to a level which disincentivises investment. So tax very much top of the agenda in terms of European CEOs. There's also a worry about shifting consumer behaviour, arising from organisations worrying whether they can react satisfactorily to new consumer spending patterns and the impact of digital technologies and data analytics. Going back to what President Barroso spoke about earlier on the availability of key skills, this highlights the gaps and mismatches which are emerging between the skills that are now required in Europe as compared with what the talent pool is producing. And finally, as many of us experience in our own business, the inability to finance growth. And that reflects the lack of availability of some of the traditional sources of funding, and also a particularly low risk appetite among those financial institutions who are still in the market for providing capital funding. So those concerns are what's coming through from Europe. What we be hearing coming through from Irish CEOs very much mirrors this, maybe not always in the same level of priority. Okay, that's some of the headline facts and figures. But how are CEOs responding? And this is what the CEOs of Europe, the 400 CEOs, have told us. Firstly, in the search for growth, CEOs are targeting organic growth. So therefore, opportunities such as mergers and acquisitions, strategic alliances are on the agenda, but at a much lower priority than in previous years. Secondly, investment priorities are centering around customers, particularly existing customers, and on new ways to stimulate demand and to foster customer loyalty. And finally, as you would expect, further improving operational effectiveness is still very high on the agenda of all of the CEOs. And I think when you look at those three actions, I think we can all agree that they are very internally focused. And it's clear that as a group, European CEOs are now looking more inwards, they're leveraging existing relationships, and are essentially going back to basics. And when we contrast that with the plans we would have seen in the period from 2002 and 2007, very much the growth phase, in that era, the plans focused completely differently, very much focusing on growth through acquisition, expansion to new business areas, and major R&D spend. But those initiatives are no longer on the table. I'm just going to very briefly look at the three actions and focus firstly on where CEOs across Europe see the growth opportunities. As you can see there, overall, there's a very cautious approach being adopted. There are fewer strategic shifts, and there is a cautious allocation of scarce resources. Looking on the left-hand side, you'll see that almost half of CEOs are planning for growth from existing domestic markets or existing foreign markets, rather than exploring new markets, new mergers and acquisition opportunities, or new strategic alliances. And it's clear from the survey results that European CEOs have a greater preference than their global counterparts to look to existing foreign markets. And the most referenced markets that are come through in the survey results are China, US, Germany, Brazil, and Russia, as you would anticipate. When you look at the right-hand side of the slide, you can see there's further evidence of caution, with less than 25% of CEOs planning on developing new products or services. And just below it there, only 19% looking to new mergers and acquisitions or joint ventures or strategic alliances. And I think, very worryingly, in the lower box there, only 7% of CEOs are looking at opportunities in new foreign markets. When we look at the Irish situation, these results tie in with what we see on the ground, with Irish companies who are primarily looking to exploit existing foreign markets where they've already built alliances and have a high level of confidence in doing business in those markets. And similarly, we're not seeing many Irish companies exploring new markets where they haven't done business before. But it's worth just taking a moment just to look at the global growth leaderboard. And while CEOs are staying with familiar markets, they need to know and also be where the growth is. And what our survey has identified in association with independent economic analysis is 4 distinct economic clusters: 2 faster, 2 slower. If we look at the best in class, and that's the group that's growing and accelerating, and this group includes Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, and you can see that Indonesia is the fastest growing economy in the group, forecasting 6.2% per annum for the next 3 years. There's a second fast lane, which is countries that are growing but decelerating. And this includes China, India, Russia, you can see there. And what's interesting is that the BRIC countries, which is Jim O'Neill's famous acronym, are now starting to decouple. There are two slow lanes. There's the growing countries, economies that are growing but are susceptible to disruption, and that includes the US and mature European countries. And as you can see, it also includes Ireland. And I do stress that we didn't lobby for this, but it is interesting to see how we are now viewed externally with a projected growth rate of 1.9% per annum for the years 2013 to 2015. And that certainly is good for the marketing of our FDI offering, which we all spoke about earlier. And then there's the, what you might call, the bad boys, and thankfully we have left that group. And overall, when you look at it, you can see that the pattern here is among those four lanes, and that this is likely, the economic analysis is telling us this is likely to remain for the next decade. So while growth rates among both mature and growing economies are diverging, and with unique opportunities and threats in each market, what's happening is that CEOs are looking for specific or niche opportunities in all clusters. Let me just make some comments in relation to the second action that the CEOs have told us they're taking, and that's very much around concentrating on the customer. And irrespective of the markets they're in, CEOs have one overwhelming goal, which is to grow their customer base. And this is against a backdrop where, as we all know, the recession has not just hit businesses badly, but has also hit consumers. Between 2000 and 2011, consumer spending in mature markets increased by just 2.1%, whereas when you looked at the growing markets, it increased by a much healthier 5.7%. And what our survey tells us is that CEOs are looking for ways to stimulate demand and foster customer loyalty. And what this will require is a rigorous understanding of consumers, of their needs, and most importantly, what they want in the future. And digital technology is a key enabler to achieve this. And you would have heard the Taoiseach speak earlier this morning around the need for the Irish economy to embrace and push forward the digital technology agenda. So it will be essential for organisations to move closer to operating in real time and also to harness predictive data analytics. So what we're seeing in practice is businesses mixing traditional market research with timely social media insights and the output of data analytics. And the end result of all of this is accurate information on predictive buying patterns.
Ronan, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be there. But to make digital and data analytics work needs a blend of specialised skills. And again, you would have heard Manuel Barroso this morning speaking about the mismatch between the skills required and the talent pool. And what we need is market and retail knowledge, technology and data management, analysis capability, and transformational knowledge. And there's no doubt that organisations getting this right will have a powerful edge over competitors. Let me just move on to the third and final action, and that's very much around refining operational effectiveness. And what you can see there is that 83% of European CEOs are planning cost reductions initiatives this year. And that compares with 70% in the global survey. But while the focus is on cost reduction, there very much is a focus also on balancing efficiency with agility and trying to cut costs without cutting value. And for many companies, cost cutting is becoming an annual exercise. And I think if I was to ask in this room any company that is not engaging in 2013 in a cost reduction program, very few hands would stay down. What we're also seeing is that CEOs are viewing strategic outsourcing to well-managed delivery centres as a key contributor to cost savings. And 39% of CEOs have told us that they will outsource a business process or function in 2013. That's what's been told to us when we look forward 12 months. When we asked the respondents to look forward 3 years, what they've said to us is that their number one priority of European CEOs is to create and foster a skilled workforce. And this is very much supported by a recent study by Oxford Economics, by Oxford Economics, which looked at the in-demand skills at European and US firms over the next 5 to 10 years. And what the requirement will be for people who can develop scenario plans, people who are able to innovate, people who can manage diverse employees, and people who will understand corporate IT, software, and systems. And you will notice from the map that it indicates differing demands for skills between the US and European organisations, with innovation being more important in the US and an understanding of IT being more important in Europe. But certainly that mismatch which José Manuel Barroso spoke about this morning is very evident from this survey. So, in conclusion, I'm trying to stay to the time. What I presented there is a short, high-level summary of the findings. There's plenty of further details by region, by sector available on our website. And in summary, the clear perspectives are emerging. European CEOs are focusing on the short-term challenges. Overall, there's a sense of caution. Confidence is low, but predicted to increase over the longer term. CEOs are also focusing on known markets rather than new markets for growth prospects. The customer is king. Customer engagement is the investment priority, with companies seeking new ways to stimulate demand and foster customer loyalty. And as we said earlier, digital technologies and data analytics are becoming the real game changers. And finally, organizations still seeking to reduce costs while maintaining value. And talent management is the key consideration for the longer term. So, thank you for your attention. I look forward to the presentations from Leaf, from Miles, and from Gary, and Olivia picking up on some of the points in the survey as when we have the panel. So thank you very much indeed.